All right, we're going to go ahead and call the Capital Funding Protection Committee meeting for February 6, 2025 to order. And with that, could we please take a roll call?
Paul Anderson,
Here?
Clara Andriola,
Present.
Elise Bunkowski, Charlene Bybee,
Here.
Chris Cobb,
Here.
Andrew Diss, Jean Herman, Justin Ivory,
Here.
Miguel Martinez,
Here.
Devin Reese, Craig Wessner.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 2, public comment. Do we have any public comment? No public comment. Wow, all right. We're going to be skipping right along through the agenda today. All right, we'll move on to 201, approval of the minutes of the December 5th, 2024 meeting of the Capital Funding Protection Committee.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right, and 202, presentation discussion on the cadence of future Capital Funding Protection Committee agendas.
Good afternoon. For the record, Dawit Hadgu, I'm the Deputy Chief for Facility Management Department. And nice to see you this afternoon, all of you. I'm just going to go through the list. I'm sure you have a copy of this, but if you have any questions that I can answer to. For our February 6th, which is today, 2025, the design phase funding for the pre-K 5, supporting elementary school for the Smith Ridge and Dodson community, which Adam and is going to explain to you on the next presentation. And the second one is the construction phase funding for the Reed High School modernization, which Teresa is also going to explain a lot more detail of what those funds are. Next one is on April 3rd, 2025. We're going to come back asking for design phase funding for Maxwell Elementary School. That's a modernization school, part of our FMP. And we're going to also come back to update you on Loader Elementary School rebuild. Typically in every year around April, we usually give you an update on the CIP. But this time we have to move it to June because trying to coordinate our effort with our finance department because there's a ERP system coming into the district to change our management software, and everybody's tied up. So we just want to give them some time so that we'll have more time to work. So the CIP was going to be moved to the June timeline. June 5th, 2025, we're going to be talking about the FY26 to 30, the 5-year plan CIP. FY26 capital renewal plan, which we are working on right now. We're going to come in at that time to show you what the yearly renovation work that we do every year. Construction phasing funding for Matthew Elementary School modernization. In a previous time, we probably have shown this thing to be earlier than what it is, but we have to delay it due to some bidding process that we had some hiccup during the bidding process. So now we are in line with our budget and timeline. Construction phase funding, we're coming back for Loader during the June time frame. And design phase funding for Sparks High School modernization. Those are the big item that we're going to come through the June timeline. Around August 7 or at August 7, 2025, we're going to come up to update you on the Palmer Elementary School modernization, which is in a design phase today. And then we're going to be asking for design phase funding for the North Valley High School at that time too. During the October 7, 2025, we're going to come back asking for construction phase funding for Palmer modernization, and then the design phase funding for Sparks Middle School. That's a replacement school that we're going to be coming and asking for that. And during the December 4th, typically we're going to provide you the annual accountability report for our department.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Cobb.
With your, maybe, there we go. With the June, the CIP coming in June, do we run a file just because you've already have to submit to the state your budget?
Yeah, so we're working on that one, but with the legislation going on, the ARP, we couldn't, our finance department couldn't find time to look into those numbers. So
Right.
we're going to do it as early as possible.
I guess my only concern is if we haven't seen the CIP to review it, it's already gonna have to be submitted to the state for budget approval prior to this meeting,
Let me get back to you on that.
right? You guys have already gonna be submitted in May? Yeah. So I think, that's my only fear is this body will not have an opportunity to
To
review
look at it.
and comment on concerns or questions. It'll already be to the state for approval. So, something to consider.
Thank you. I'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah, if you could get back to us, because I was thinking that maybe it was a little bit later in June, but I think you're right. It has to be submitted by that point.
By May, okay.
If I could take a stab at that, Adam Searcy for the record. It's a totally good point, and this being, you know, a legislative year, it's basically not too dissimilar from the district's budget as it's informed by the state legislature, right? We have to submit a preliminary budget, a preliminary 5-year CIP that might look very similar to the one that was approved last year. It's essentially a placeholder in dollar amount. The specifics, the details will still come here, but for the purposes of complying with the state budget requirement submissions and the timelines associated with that, like what you're talking about, we'll comply with that with a tentative. And then in legislative years, there's opportunities for revisions and things like that. So I want to acknowledge your point, and our CFO is certainly very familiar with all that. We'll be in compliance with the state. We'll still give the same opportunity and discretion for input to this body. It will then, of course, have to go to the board for approval and be ultimately submitted with the entire school district budget, whether it's, you know, before July 1st or if there's any revision opportunities, it goes all together with the district's total budget. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we'll go ahead and close item 2.02. Move on to 2.03, presentation discussion on the construction phase funding for Edward C. Reed High School Modernization Project in the amount of $87,500,000.
Good afternoon. Teresa Polson, Director of Design for the Washoe County School District. Thanks for having me today. So Reed High School was the first high school that was recommended to receive a modernization plan. I'll grab my clicker here. Back in 2023, when the modernization plan was approved by the board. So we quickly retained Collaborative Design Studios to provide the architecture and engineering services for this project. Collaborative is a really good partner with the school district. We've used them for some time on a number of things, and most recently they've been working on our Incline High School expansion that's getting ready to wrap up here pretty soon. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we came up with the priorities and sort of guideline for these modernization projects after the modernization plan was approved. We knew that we really needed to create some sort of priority guidelines for us moving forward because we knew it would set a precedence for these types of projects, you know, that are to come over the next 15 years. So our first goal was to sit down with the area superintendents and ask them to provide priorities that came from leadership. And their top 3 priorities were safety and security, removing the portables, which we all really want to remove pretty badly. And then also these 3 education specifications priorities, and those are to provide some flexible learning spaces, media centers, career centers, and to provide some outdoor learning spaces with shade. Once we gathered that information from leadership, we then provided a survey to all the principals that we sent out to all the schools. We basically said to them, listen, leadership has given us direction to provide these 3 top priorities. If we have more money in the budget for this project, what are your list of priorities? So we sort of, gave them a long list of items, and when we interviewed Reed or they filled out their survey, these are their top 3 priorities for this project. And that is the athletic improvements on both the interior and exterior of the building, as well as remodeling the restrooms. There's a lot more. They had a pretty long list, and I think we've done a really good job accommodating a lot in our scope of work that we'll talk about here in just a minute. So in June of '24, we did retain Plenium Builders as our construction manager at risk. So since that time, our pre-construction team, our design team have been very, very busy meeting with the school staff, doing all of our programming meetings and finalizing our designs. We've met with Student Voice and gotten some really good feedback from that group in December, as well as we had a community meeting at Reed High School in December as well. Had great feedback, really positive comments. And in addition, we did need to apply for a conditional use permit at the City of Sparks due to some inadequacy in our number of trees that we were trying to provide for the school. But we did come to an agreement on that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is our overall project scope, and it really is a result of, those top priorities from leadership, as well as the preferences that the school items that they wanted to try and accomplish. But ultimately, in a nutshell, it is a 70,000 square foot expansion of the school. That includes a 10 classroom addition and a band and orchestra expansion, athletic addition, and new student hubs, and new interior surrounding interior courtyard that surrounds the interior corridor that surrounds the courtyard. So the kids don't have to go outside to get to the cafeteria anymore. I won't go through all of these in detail, but the other big highlight, I think, for the school especially is replacement of the football field to artificial turf. And we chose to do artificial just due to the high use of that school, not just by the students, but the community in general. And then also a new press box. And of course, all the safety improvements. In addition to this, that isn't written down here, there is a lot more work happening, not actually just listed here. There's, work above the ceilings that are happening, domestic water lines that are being replaced, sections of sewer piping that are going to be replaced. So it's going to be a very, very busy campus. This is our new landscape plan. Very, very exciting. I'm really anxious to see this. I think it's just going to have such a nice, fresh impact on the school and how it looks when you approach the school. We'll be installing 65 new trees and shrubs around the school. You'll see a number of them down there on the Bering Boulevard on the south side, as well as all around the campus and the building itself. We've got this nice new courtyard that's going in the center of the school. We're enhancing that quite a bit with new trees and shrubs. We are also looking at improving an additional courtyard space for the students if the budget allows. So we'll see what happens there. So this is a really pretty simplistic phasing plan. The reason I included it is really just to give you a general idea of completion dates for the main areas of construction. So the bottom right is the classroom addition in yellow. The athletics addition is in yellow at the top of the existing school, and then the band addition. Bottom left, those are really big additions that we're anxious to get completed, and the plan is to have those done fall of '26 before school starts in fall of '26. Lots more information here, but the rest of the areas are all due to be complete fall of 2027. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about, this is, like I say, very simplistic. We probably have 5 or 6 pages of logistics and phasing plans that Plenium has provided to us. Because of the complexity of this project, there's a lot going on in all areas of the building, inside and out. That tool is going to be great for not only the school communicating with its school, but for safety reasons too. They've taken a lot of safety steps. They're including a single point of entry for all of their construction workers and subs at the school so that they know who's coming and going at all times, who's going to be on site working. So I really like that idea, and I'm excited about seeing that take place. And then I lost my train of thought. I'll get it back. Anyway, again, really busy site. They'll be meeting with the staff on a regular basis, usually weekly or bi-weekly with school district staff and the school staff so that they know what all the activities are happening, you know, going over the 2-week activities so they know, you know, when to move students and all that type of stuff, what's going to be cordoned off and when. Again, safety's biggest priority to keep the students and staff and the public safe and out of the work areas. So these are our really cool renderings that Collaborative Design has provided us. This is the new entry to the school. I did want to provide the existing photo on the right. That's our existing entrance to Reed High School right now. It's very set back to the school, kind of covered in trees. Collaborative's done a great job by sort of really protruding that entrance out in the front by just providing this sort of metal perforated facade with the new logo and the school name. And you'll see that perforated metal that they'll continue around the rest of the building to make that cohesive feel. This is a photo of the new classroom expansion. Again, a lot of that same perforated metal framing and some vertical, these blue vertical wings you see are used for passive cooling and obviously bringing some more color to the building. And it's kind of hard to see in this photo, but we're also painting those blue sort of vertical concrete panels around the whole entire building, again, to tie in the color and make it more cohesive. This is really an enhanced pedestrian walkway. We do have one right now, but it's small, it's sort of pavement, and so we really wanted to really strengthen the connection between the football field and the school. So we've widened it, put some concrete down. We've got new lighting going in for safety, and then you'll see a pretty good row of trees all along that pathway. In the back there, you'll see again more of that perforated metal screening to that'll be attached to the gym and another Reed logo. We're probably going to have some more, you know, signage around the school, large signage, just to help wayfinding and that type of thing that we're still working on. The building that you see on the right is the new grounds building, ground storage building, and our new exterior restroom, which is a really nice location because it's central to all the fields for the kids to get to. And then lastly, this is a rendering of the new shade structure and the new courtyard. It is now all one level. Currently, that courtyard out there is multiple levels, kind of hard to get around. I failed to mention that, you know, CMU is sort of our standard material that we use here at the school district. So all of this additional or added construction is in CMU. And then we have this nice blue shade structure. It's going to be awesome for events, you know, for outdoor learning during the day, during the night, for community, however they choose to use it. Again, we have more of that perforated metal screening that they've introduced in this back area too, again, for continuity of the project. So this brings us to our construction phase funding request for GMP2. It's for a total of $87.5 million. We did our typical breakdown here between construction, professional services, and furniture, fixtures, and equipment. This is just a little bit deeper dive in the construction fees only. These obviously were provided by Plenium. They're based on the estimates for our design development package that we currently have. We've broken out the site work, the new construction, and the tenant improvement costs. We do have a construction contingency of 2.5% for the construction contractor. We did include a contingency of 5% for the owner side. That's a little bit higher than we might normally do, but since this is based on a design development package, we're not, we don't have a 100% package quite yet. But in addition to that, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world right now with the economy and who knows with tariffs and that type of thing. So we're pretty comfortable with that 5% contingency. And then we do have money in here right now for some allowances for some alternates, what we call add alternates for some other improvements, and they're listed below. Those items are just some additional items that we sure would like to accomplish at the school, and I think will just help enhance our goal for this project overall. This is a professional services breakdown of our professional services and consultants that we hired through our construction phase. We do this breakdown so that you have a better idea of really what the scope and the services are for each of these consultants. This is a breakdown of our furniture, fixtures, and equipment. This really is contributing to really the new areas of this project specifically. We did include a 10% contingency for now for all of this FF&E, as we haven't dealt as deeply as we might like to quite yet. So our next steps for this project is to, the construction manager at risk will advertise for bidding in March. And we anticipate starting construction in June with a completion of, in fall of 2027. That is it. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Questions? Member Bybee?
When you were showing the outside of the building, I was curious if we have any, I know on our elementary schools and moving to middle schools, we were trying to do the door numbering for first responders and emergency responders to know where they are
Yes.
going in case of a medical emergency or a threat on campus. Do we have any of that at Reed High School, or will it be part of this where, I know high school is very different than elementary school, but are we going to incorporate that so we can share that with first responders when they arrive?
Yes, we are. That is included in the scope of work for this project. Yep.
Any, yes, sure. Madam Pankowski, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Elise Pankowski for the record. I thought at the last presentation of this, there was also something going on in the interior gym for the basketball bleachers. Is that correct? Was that on this project, or was that a different one?
I think it might be a different one. We did just replace the flooring in the gyms at Reed High School.
Okay.
There'll be no change in the bleachers, but we are adding air conditioning to the gym.
That's a good one. And then can you confirm, are the bathrooms going to be just for football or for all sports outside?
All sports.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then last question I have, on the exterior phasing plan, it looks like the grounds building is being plopped right in the baseball field. That's already there, I believe.
Correct. That is correct.
So I'd asked Tammy about this a while ago, and I forgot to follow up with her the other day, but I was at a baseball game where the dugouts are very close, and a kid got hit in the face with a baseball, so I wanted to make sure that the distance is safe for those
Yes.
baseball players as well, and I think that building kind of impedes on it a little bit.
That's the first thought I had, but
Okay.
there, but according to the staff, they didn't think it would be an issue at all.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Can you guys
I
just
didn't-
double check that?
Absolutely.
Distance and safety?
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, that's all I
Yes.
have.
Hi, okay,
Hi.
so I got a couple. I certainly couldn't overlook this, but what's the difference between a consultant, construction administration, and a construction manager? Because they look like they do the same job.
So, yeah, your line one versus, let me get there.
we
Yeah,
used to
line
just
one
have a-
versus line three.
Yeah,
So
we used-
line one is specifically the architect, specifically the architect, the electrical, mechanical, structural engineers.
So this is their consulting fees to basically follow up with the contract that we've already given them.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Okay, so we didn't just, okay, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Next question. On on the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment breakdown,
Yeah.
is there anything on this list that we're supplying to this school that we haven't supplied to the other schools?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so I just want to, because I know we haven't always got this breakdown, so I don't want to nitpick the breakdown. Some of these things seem like they might be just, quite honestly, might be, maybe should just constantly get paid out of the general fund, like janitorial equipment, stuff like that.
Yeah, so most all of this, as I said earlier, is all geared toward the new areas specifically. We do, like, there's areas like weights and athletics, they currently have weights, right? And athletics, my understanding is that FF&E is just enhancing those a little bit more, probably, again, to provide what we've provided, like at HUG, for example, right?
Okay.
So,
Okay, thank you.
uh-huh.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Westner.
I got a question about the metal facade.
Yes,
You know, I think it looks really nice, and I'm not against making things look nice. But I'm just curious how much the percentage of the construction cost that metal facade is, because it's not doing anything, in my opinion, to enhance the educational experience of the children at the schools. I'm not against it, but I'm just curious as to what percentage of the construction cost it
percentage
is.
of overall construction. I
Yeah.
don't have that answer. Does anyone in the audience?
It's 1.6 million.
For just the metal?
Yep. That's just metal panels by itself.
Yeah, the facade, there's, the entrance, and then I think on the back side, they've got that perforated metal.
Yeah, this perforated.
Oh,
Oh, the shade
no.
structure.
Yeah, no.
Devin Harrell with Plenium Builders, for the record. So are we talking about metal panels?
Yeah, the metal panels, you know, the front entrance around the new
perforated.
addition.
Yeah, altogether, the metal panel scope is 1.6 million
Okay.
of the budget.
Okay.
But Devin, does that include like the shade structure?
That does not include the
Metal
shade
or-
structure,
Yeah.
no.
My concern isn't with the shade structure, it's just,
Sure.
I appreciate it. Thanks, that's my only
Thank you.
question.
Any other questions? I just had one. If you could give us some examples, under the construction fees breakdown, allowance for alternates, 3.4 million.
Yep.
Could
Oh,
you
let me get there.
kind of give us an example of what that all entails?
Yeah, so those alternates that I've listed below, alternate 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is additional work, like we are converting the restrooms or remodeling the restrooms in Red Hall right now. That is in our base scope of work. They had requested if we could also do the same thing in Yellow Hall. And so we said, yes, we'll include that in the design. If we can afford it, we'll do it. And what you see there is a $663,000. I think that's for that scope of work. And so we have 3.4 allowed, right? Like we think potentially some allowance and extra money to go toward those alternates that you see there. So clearly we have a total of $6.1 million in alternates. We're not going to be able to do all of them.
Thanks, and that's why I was confused, because I wasn't understanding the difference between the two. So
Yes.
thank you for the
Sure,
explanation there.
absolutely.
All right, any other questions before, yes, Mr. Cobb?
How does this do for us, the overall budget we previously approved? Are we,
This is all within the original budget
Okay.
and the CIP.
so you've been able to build in the alternates, we got the contingencies, all our fees within our original budget?
Yes.
So,
Woo-hoo.
does the contract include, just knowing like you, what you were saying with, we're all wondering what's gonna happen with our budgets. Does the contract with Plenium include allowing for allowances if we're running into tariffs that are increasing?
That's where our contingencies come in.
Okay,
Yeah,
so the contract does allow that
yes,
ability
yes.
for the district
So
and Plenium
the
to have
general
that
contractor has their contingency, as you see the 2.5% line item. Our contingency is not, it's reserved
Yeah,
in our budget.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
okay. Perfect.
All right, just one last
Yeah,
comment, No question. Just want to say thank you for working on everyone. I was impressed by the meeting that you guys had there at the school.
Thank you.
All the parents, thank you for Plenium, their conversation with the folks. I mean, I believe all the concerns about safety and all those kind of things you guys did a great job of addressing. So I want to say thank you for that communication. It goes a long ways.
Absolutely, appreciate that.
And with that, we'll go ahead and close item 2.03 and move on to 2.04. Presentation discussion on the pre-K through 8 study as approved by the Board of Trustees.
Hey, folks, good afternoon. Adam Searcy again for the record. I'm going to take this one. This is an informational only item, and I'm going to speed through this deck. It was presented about 10 days ago to our Board of Trustees, and it really informs the next item before the committee here tonight. I'll start from the end, sort of. This was unanimously approved by the Board of Trustees, and ultimately followed by an approved item from the board to temporarily close Pine Middle School beginning in the 2026-27 school year for the purposes of reconstruction as a new large modern elementary school. I'm going to walk you through how they got to that conclusion in what we called a pre-K-8 feasibility study. So this work was born out of the 2023 Facility Modernization Plan. The Facility Modernization Plan, the FMP, recommended, amongst many other things, the construction of a new Vaughn Middle School, which in combination, which will have greater capacity than the existing Vaughn Middle School, and in combination with the new Marcy Hers Middle School and declining enrollment in a variety of other areas, there will exist upon the opening of Vaughn Middle School enough middle school capacity for the foreseeable future so as to not necessarily need Pine Middle School anymore. So the final recommendation from the Facility Modernization Plan was to either convert Pine Middle School into an elementary school or a K-8 school. And the committee, the plan ultimately said, you need to study this a little bit more. The recommendation was to convene this K-8 task force and conduct this study. So that's what the 2024 really was about. We extended the services of the consultant that did the facility modernization plan with us and set about a very similar process, convening task forces, task force groups, engaging with a variety of different stakeholders, and really doing a thorough effort towards researching best practices, pros and cons, and feasibility for these locations, specifically Pine and also Trainer Middle School has a similar opportunity or potential. Their work concluded, as I mentioned, just a couple of weeks ago with a recommendation to convert both of these schools in the future to large modern pre-K-8 or pre-K-5 elementary schools. These would be not necessarily identical to our current elementary schools, but they would meet current elementary school standards and potentially be master planned for future expansion. That was the recommendation. We went through over the course of about 20 minutes with our Board of Trustees, really detailing this process. These are just a snapshot of the community engagement activities that took place throughout 2024, similar to our FMP, just more targeted towards those communities, as well as focus groups and task force meetings of a variety of different groups of folks. You know, really starting with an open mind, it was important each and every one of those meetings, again at our Board of Trustees meeting, that no preconceived notions. The consultant, district administration, no one was pushing, one solution or another, really trying to push everyone to put their bias aside and consider the merits of the opportunity in front of us. And as any good study, I think, should reveal, is that it's a mixed bag. There's disadvantages and advantages of both options. I won't detail this for you. Some of it's in the eye of the holder, but many of those hinge on very unique ingredients relative to the community and the school that were in place. And it started with just identifying these, highlighting these risks or opportunities, and then having these conversations with a wide variety of individuals, teachers, parents, community members, school district leadership, students, and multiple open community meetings throughout 2024. This was not just a conversation in the court of public opinion. This was actually a very quantitative analysis around, what does it cost to run a K-8 versus a K-5? And it's not just as simple as adding 3 additional cohorts of students onto a campus. We really got into a lot of detail around extracurricular activities that are available in our traditional middle schools, and teacher allocations and transportation obligations, depending on a variety of different outcomes. So looking at those in detail and compiling them in a thorough report was all a part of this work. They summarized this report into 4 major findings or categories of high-level conclusions. And the first one is, as it says there, pre-K-8 has merit for future considerations. Multiple studies, multiple data sets across the country, multiple examples. We convened virtual conversations with all of these school districts who have implemented pre-K-8s in their communities with varied success. And so we got a lot of really honest feedback, often hinging on some intangibles relative to the community support, the key individuals, the principals that really championed their success. In other communities, those variables waned or transitioned over time, including enrollment declines. In one instance at Long Beach USD, where they reverted back to a pre-K-5 because some of those intangible variables changed over time. So just learning about that, but also not disparaging, acknowledging that the K-8 has merit for future consideration. There is some data to suggest greater levels of success. These are limited sample sizes, but really looking at that elementary to middle school point of transition as being a grade level where students often struggle for a variety of reasons. Absenteeism, academic performance, things like that. Some data suggests tend to be better or improved in a K-8 environment. And then finding 2, they confirmed operational feasibility. So, again, a lot of high-level pros and cons detailed in the study. You can see some of those bulleted up there, but basically reevaluating the enrollment projections, evaluating some of the impacts to the operational departments, nutrition services, transportation, et cetera. Just basically stating that, it's not, it is feasible. It is not infeasible to operate a K-8 at one or both of these sites. However, finding 3 of 4 suggests that if done correctly, or AKA equitably, with respect to our traditional middle schools, 6th, 7th, and 8th, it would likely require increased staffing and operational expenses. Won't get into the weeds on that, but again, when I mentioned extracurricular activities and some of the specialized academic opportunities that are provided in all of our 6 through 8 middle schools, in order to provide those same opportunities in a K-8 while still staffing it at a K-5 level is a little bit duplicative. The way this was presented in the study is that this is not just a large elementary school, an extension of an elementary school environment that happens to encompass 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. We really wanted to model this to say, hey, if I go here for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I still get the same extracurricular activities that a middle school student at a traditional 6th, 7th, and 8th grade school receives. Modeling it operationally, cost-wise, under that premise, yields a higher cost to operate this school in that fashion. If you're willing to make concessions on those elements, you know, you could see break even or things of that nature, but just really being clear and detailed about this with our business office and getting into the weeds. These weren't general statements. And then last but not least, throughout our engagement, predominantly we heard very limited stakeholder support. There are, again, a variety of reasons for this. Everyone has their bias, but juxtaposed to the feedback from successful school districts where it was heard that, you know, when the community's behind you, when the administrator's behind you, this can be a special and successful environment. We absolutely did not hear that. It's not to say that it was unanimous, you know, there were voices of interest and support, but predominantly the community support for the K-8 scenarios really wasn't there. So ultimately, we made an important point to tie this back into the FMP. When we did the work with the FMP, we proposed scenarios like this, and the recommendation was basically either or, you know, either a K-5 on this site or a K-8 on this site. So tying this back in remains consistent with the FMP recommendations from 2023, while improving the facility equity, creating a new facility which would be in compliance or equitable with the rest of our newest elementary schools. And then I'm going to talk about here in a moment, or briefly introduce the next item that talks about our opportunity to thoughtfully master plan this design for potential future expansion. Under no way are we suggesting that's scheduled, but just, hey, if we're going to design something with the potential, why not incorporate some thoughtful planning up front? So this is just a conceptual image of what it might look like. Again, the next items go into more detail on this, but the idea would be to construct a new elementary school on the left-hand side, the Pine campus, the right-hand side, the Trainer campus, that would look nothing like the existing schools. It would likely be a different prototype, a different design than our current elementary schools as well, but would still have the same pieces and parts, would essentially be a new modern elementary school. And if a potential expansion is ever desired into a K-8, there would be thoughtful master planning baked into this design. Again, this is the exact same slide deck that was presented to the Board of Trustees. This suggests the construction and implementation schedule for Pine that might be achieved, predicated on a variety of approvals, including what's on the agenda here this evening. But then, as I mentioned, the board voted to approve the temporary closure of Pine beginning in the 26-27 school year. So that's kind of what you see there in the middle of that Gantt chart. When Vaughn opens, which is fall 2026, the students currently zoned for Pine and attending Pine would be rezoned and enrolled elsewhere. Likely Vaughn, Marcy Hers, DePoli, perhaps elsewhere. We're working through that with the Zoning Advisory Committee 2026. That campus would be vacant and allow us to conduct complete reconstruction of that campus based on the work that we're hoping to begin here later tonight. So that's really it. I wanted to give you guys a speed version of how we got to really the next item here tonight. I thought it was a healthy discussion with the board. There was some positive public comment from members of the community, things of that nature. You know, this is a big opportunity, a big decision. And we put a thoughtful amount of work into it and ultimately have this study and recommendation. So I wanted to present it to you guys, if for no other reason than to inform the following recommendations on tonight's agenda. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ivory, I saw you questions building up as he spoke.
I'm a little, I guess, not up to date on exactly how all this went through, but where does this put us with, is this hopscotching anything from what we already had planned in our long-term rebuilding plan to do this, or is this kind of where we were going to go anyway? We just didn't know how many students we were going to put in the school, or what age group we were going to put in the school.
The latter. It's very consistent with the 2023 FMP, specifically Pine and Trainer middle school campuses in the FMP were slated for reconstruction. I don't have an image handy, but if you remember those bars were colored red in that instance, reconstruction, and then it was, but how? As a new elementary school or as a K-8? And the recommendation, we're going to reconstruct it in approximately this timeline, but into what type of building? They've concluded with this recommendation, and this still keeps us not only consistent with the scope, but also the schedule.
Okay, and then what happens with Smith Ridge then?
So the language that we used in the board meeting was that this would be a new elementary school to serve the Smithridge and Dodson communities. So while there's still a process to go forward to potentially rezone those students and close those schools and combine those enrollments into this new modern school, the FMP also suggests that specifically Smithridge and Dodson would be repurposed in the 2028-2029 timeframe. So this, again, remains consistent with the vision of the FMP, and we're just taking one more step forward towards executing that.
And can you go a little more detail about repurposing? Are we talking about renting this out as a landowner? Are we talking about doing something else with the district? What are we talking about?
Yeah, no, we talked pretty openly about that during the FMP, but general statements were made along the lines of the school district remains committed to the character of the community and valuing the school district's needs and thereby the needs of the students of that community and then the needs of the adults in that community, kind of in that order. So every school is going to have unique characteristics, I think, to warrant one future use over another. Concepts like a school district administrative office type of support center, an early learning, obviously the schools are built for children, so could it be converted into some sort of function that supports children, whether it's pre-K, early actual child care, or some other function like that. Of course, the options expand beyond that, but ultimately it would be probably in the 2026, 2027 timeframe where we're having serious conversations with the community and with our board about specific repurposing solutions for each of these schools.
Perhaps similar to like what we did instead?
Very similar.
Okay. Okay, that's all I got.
Member Dis?
Also for the next agenda item, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Member Bybee?
So Adam, I'm looking with Pine and with Trainer and taking, if they become the K through 5 or pre-K through 5, and you're taking the elementary schools, like you just stated, and repurposing them. Is that because our elementary school populations need more space? And I know we need new schools. So, at the end of the day, we're trying to modernization plan is to modernize all our schools. So is there a greater need on the elementary side for enrollment versus the the middle school size? And I can see that, like with Smarks Middle School, you're going to increase capacity there, and then the other, Vaughn would take up some, and then the nearby middle schools. So you're comfortable with our numbers on the middle school to shift those? And do we have, I guess my question is, are there more numbers coming up at the lower grades that to accommodate those numbers is part of the thought of what we're doing?
So it's always helpful to kind of reground any conversation on the FMP, the principles of facility equity, given those students that go to Pine, kind of the same physical opportunities that the students that go to HERS and Desert Skies experience, facility equity and efficiency. So we've seen steady enrollment declines at the district since the start of the pandemic. and looking at birth rates and enrollments all the way through kindergarten, we see that trend continuing. So when we see schools like Dodson, for example, or Duncan, with in the neighborhood of only 200 students, K through 5, these are inefficient and really scarcely resourced schools that the students are actually better served in an environment with a larger population, sort of a concentration of resources. So giving them a better facility and concentrating the resources to serve them better, we're confident that this type of portfolio adjustments or consolidations basically can meet the needs of our enrollment demands going forward and meet them in a better way than the status quo.
Yes, Mr. Westner.
Adam, I'm a little confused, and maybe this was discussed prior to me joining this prestigious board or advisory committee. But what happens, so you're taking a middle school that currently has 7th and 8th graders in it, and then you're gonna make it into a pre-K through 5. What happens to the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders? Where do they all of a sudden go? I mean, do you absorb them into other schools?
Pretty much. You know, we've got ample existing capacity at Marcy Hers and DePoli.
Okay.
And on the opening of the new Vaughn Middle School, we're going to have more capacity there than we do now. So between those 3 schools and possibly
them out a little
others,
bit.
yeah, we're going to redistribute the kids that are currently going to Pine in the 26-27 school
Okay.
year and still have comfortable capacity levels now and into the future at those schools as well.
And so then the contingency of having for 8th grade or bringing, I'm used to 7th and 8th grade, not 6th
Yeah.
and 8th, so excuse me, my brain's not working right, but 6th through 8th grade, that contingency of being able to incorporate that into that school at some future date of time that you were talking about, or leaving that option open. What is that in case all of a sudden you have an increase of 6th through 8th grade students in the district, or?
It's a combination.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is you gotta have a plan for where these kids are gonna go. It sounds like you have a plan for where those kids are gonna go. What's the need to even consider an option in the future for 6th through 8th?
The thinking is that it's twofold, that as the finding 1 and 2 suggests, the K-8's not a bad idea. And while the community support might not be there today, and the operational funding or the political support might not be there today, that might change in the future, as well as the enrollment trends may change into the future. We work pretty hard on our crystal ball and feel very confident that that's not the case and that our recommendation will stand the test of time. But ultimately, the opportunity to design a school just ever so slightly on paper to master plan it for a relatively turnkey expansion is not one we should thumb our nose at. You know, that's just a modest amount of additional design effort to keep that option open, not presuming that it's suggested, just
Yeah.
thoughtful design.
All right, I get that. And just for your information, I went through a K through 12 school. I turned out okay,
Yeah.
I think, so. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll just ask one. So thinking of it, what you're talking about is being built to a K through 12, but it's going to be utilized as K through 5. You were talking about the cost not being that much greater to build it that way. What about the maintenance costs of that? If it's not being completely utilized as a K through 8, what kind of expenses are incurred by just maintaining that facility?
I appreciate the opportunity to clarify, because I got this question from our trustees. This will be an elementary school. It will look like an elementary school. There will be no, shell for future expansion or undeveloped playground area for a future footprint of expansion. obviously, we haven't even designed it yet, but this will be a 80,000 to 100,000 square foot elementary school that will have all the same pieces and parts and cost essentially the same as our current elementary schools cost to operate. Does that answer your question?
So what you're saying is there really wouldn't be any additional cost to maintain it because it's an elementary school?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll go ahead and close item 2.04. Move on to 2.05, presentation discussion on the design phase funding for a new elementary school to serve the current Smith Ridge Elementary School, Edwin Dodson Elementary School, and other school communities on the existing Edward L. Pine Middle School campus in the amount of $12 million.
Hi, Teresa Polson again, Director of Design. So I'll just run through this real quick. I think Adam covered most of this, but again, back in 23 December, Pine and Trainer were both recommended by the Facility Modernization Plan to be studies to be potential pre-K through 8th grade schools. Can and Design performed this pre-K through 8 study, which culminated recently, and the Board of Trustees did approve that study and the recommendation to build an elementary school to serve Smith Ridge and Dotson Elementary. So really the scope of this design phase of work is we are first and foremost recommending that we do a full assessment of the existing Pine building. You see the picture of Pine there below, and it's got this concrete sort of wings sticking out, and it's just a really ugly building. So we would very much like to redo the facade of this school, and we just need to try and find out if that is possible to potentially remove that skin of that building and save the structure and be able to reuse that building as a shell. Ultimately, we're asking this consultant to assess it, both the utilities and the building itself. Can we save some money by reusing this shell, or is that going to be worth it, or do we want to just knock the thing down and rebuild? So that's really what this concept phase and assessment phase is about. The roofing and mechanical systems in this building were already planned to be replaced in their entirety in our capital renewal plan, so we know those have already outlived their usefulness. So step 2 will be to then go into the concept design once we figure out if we're going to save the building or use the structure, but roll into concept design phase for the new elementary school and master planned for K through 8 as Adam just discussed. And it would be per, of course, our normal education specifications, and we'd like to certainly assess any sustainable options that we might have for that school site as well. Next step would be to go through our request for proposal process for a construction manager at risk to retain our contractor, and then go into full design phase. Whoops. That's what I want. So this is our breakdown of our design phase estimates. I will stress that this is certainly a budgetary number until we get our assessment completed and we get our concept design completed. We're not really sure, obviously, what we're going to need as far as all of these services go, but this is our best guess at this time. It is $9.7 million, but we are asking for a full $12 million right now for this design phase work. That amount was already approved in our 5-year CIP, and any of those unused funds will be used towards construction phase funding if we get to that point. So our next steps would be to complete this assessment and the concept design through June of 25, and then solicit our construction manager at risk for pre-construction services. Go through the design phase from 25 to 26 July, and then bid for construction and anticipate starting construction at some level fall of 2026. Questions?
Thank you, Teresa. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Searcy, I'm going to ask you to come back up because I have some process questions about how we got here and moving forward for decisions like this. I almost feel like we got some of the steps backwards where, you know, the Cannon study was put in front of the Board of Trustees, and they made a policy decision that, you know, Pine has outlived its life. We feel like we can better repurpose it for these purposes. And so last week, the trustees made the decision to go ahead with this plan that you're putting forward. We are the fiscal body. We're not a policy body, right? And so I don't disagree with the conclusion that the Board of Trustees came to, but I kind of feel like we're getting put in a box. And I want to make sure I don't feel like this moving forward with the trustees saying, hey, you have to do this. And we might have a disagreement. Half of this body is made up of elected officials that we sit on. They make policy and fiscal decisions all the time. So I'm almost wondering if in the future, for big decisions like this, maybe there's joint meetings that we do with the trustees. That way all of us here can hear the policy reasoning for how they ended up at the decision. Because the trustees can say they want to build 100 new schools, but unless we say, here's the funding for 100 new schools, you know, they're up a creek without a paddle. They can't do it without us. So I've just been sitting here kind of wondering if we did this in the right order this time, and I want to make sure that we get it right moving forward. It's not really a question, it's an observation, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I appreciate the opportunity to comment on this and for you expressing that perspective, because that is something that occurs to, like, I don't want anybody to feel like we're being presumptuous with how we're presenting this. A couple points. As I mentioned on the past item, the FMP, which went before this committee and the board multiple times, suggests, again, it's a plan, but it suggests the complete reconstruction of Pine and Trainer as a part of that program. So that was one sort of approval from this body relative to this work. And this is consistent with that. It also recommended the study itself, which we then have proceeded on as I just described. Also last summer, as Teresa mentioned, the 5-year CIP came before this committee. It's a plan in nature. It doesn't actually authorize us to expend any funds, but it explicitly identified the design phase and construction phase funding for a major modernization project. Reconstruction of Pine Middle School was in that. Again, noting that we didn't highlight it in this level of detail. The fair, I think, difference in this instance relative to the study, the facility modernization plan, the FMP, came for action to this committee before it went to the board. It was still a plan, but it was so substantial that we, felt and took the opportunity to follow that sequence. In this instance, it's just a study. It's a little more narrow, but to be fair to your point, we didn't bring this to you for information or action before we brought it to the board. So I want to acknowledge your perspective on that order of operations, and there's not necessarily anything to preclude us from following a more consistent recommendation to the board for these types of things going forward.
I appreciate that, Mr. Searcy, and I don't know what my colleagues on this board think of it, but, maybe there is an opportunity for joint meetings in the future for meaty, substantial decisions like this, just so we hear the questions that they're asking from their policy perspective, and we just have a fuller understanding of how we arrive at making a decision to shut down a school and move kids to new schools and everything that goes into that. So, thank you.
Yes, Member Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Dis, because I looked at all the notes on here and I'm like, wait a minute, January 28th, they already did this and now we're looking at it. And I kind of felt the same way that since I've been on this committee, it always has felt like things come to us first because we are the minding the bank, so to speak. So the funding piece of it is our responsibility, but also our input and recommendations. Ultimately, it's the Board of Trustees. But I kind of feel like we've done most things we do. We do hear first before it goes to the Board of Trustees. And sometimes things are back and forth, and that's good too. But I really appreciate Mr. Dis's point to some of these really big things, because this isn't just building another new school. It is taking, it's closing a middle school and moving elementary school kids into it, moving those middle school kids. It's a bigger thing that obviously our responsibility is the fiscal side of it. But I think as board members and community members, that's like a huge thing. And I agree with what we're going to do. I have no problem with that. But I think maybe as we look at like a bigger, a project that encompasses more, and it wouldn't even have to be maybe often, but the opportunity to do joint meetings with the Board of Trustees when we're doing something really different, when we're moving in a different direction, I think would be helpful for them and for us to look at it from policy and from fiscal. And you're right, those of us that are elected do both. It's policy and it's the fiscal side, but that would be helpful, and I would support that if it's something the trustees would be open to and you think it would be helpful to this board and to the process.
Yes, Mr. Ivory.
Okay, just a quick question on, obviously, we've got a lot of historical information from O'Brien on what our materials should be, what kind of structure we've got underneath this building. Did we just take one big, I don't remember, did we take one big wrecking ball and just knock the whole thing down? Or did we pull the outside panels off to see if we had, what I mean? How do we go about doing that at O'Brien?
Do you know the answer?
I do. O'Brien required a different solution, right? We wanted to construct a 6 through 8 middle school with a larger capacity. So we actually did do a study to not only modernize, basically gut the interior of O'Brien and expand it. And that, was, I want to say like upwards of 70% the cost of just a new build. Which has a lot of advantages. We didn't have the swing space capacity elsewhere to like vacate the campus. This would have to be done on an active campus. And then of course the physical location right there on Stead Boulevard. All of those factors led to the recommendation, the decision to reconstruct O'Brien Middle School the way we did. In this instance, like I said, we're looking to convert it into a school that would actually have close to the same or even slightly smaller total student capacity, as well as the opportunity to vacate the campus. So we're able to take a much closer look at the opportunity to salvage possibly, maybe just the structural elements of the building. I want to make it clear that we're not looking to salvage much of anything else, but, the site work, the slabs, the structural columns, if we can salvage that and start from that shell, we'll build out something that no one will ever recognize while still saving us millions. We don't know if that's possible or not, but that's the approach that we're proposing to take from the start.
Okay, perfect. And then I'd just like to chime in on, because I think Member Dis has a good point. I think everyone probably, when they opened up the packet, kind of looked at like, hey, are we still needed? Right? It's kind of like, but I would say though, on this committee, for the longest time with this committee, we approved brand new schools, right? That's what we did. We built brand new schools for the most part, other than the maintenance stuff that we were doing all the time. And basically all it was we basically got word, hey, this area of town is in need of a new elementary school, middle school, high school, whatever. And then we kind of worked that way. I think with this modernization plan, with all these schools, I think we're going to see this a lot, because there's so many moving things in there. You absolutely have to have rezoning. It's got to be a big part of it, right? Because we're building schools that are 1.5 to 2 times the capacity of what the existing schools are. So we're going to be, got a lot of moving parts. It would be, I think it would be silly for us to think that we should be the driving force. I think we just need to be kind of there as a supportive role with all these other things moving together. As long as I think as far as I'm concerned, the only way this thing kind of gets off the rails is if, and we talked about this early on, is if this modernization plan gets political in case, in point like, oh, hey, somebody uppity up somewhere in town says, you know what, I'm over here, I have family over here, so this is the next elementary school. I think that's our only real concern, is that we don't have any of that. We want to take these on a need basis, and I think we're still doing that that's why I asked you earlier, is are we moving this out of place from where it was originally put? Sounds like it wasn't. The process in which we got here is different, but I think that's all it is. It's just kind of a different process because there was a lot of, for lack of better, there was just a lot of thought that went into what we were going to do with this building. So that would be my 2 cents.
Member Andriola.
The chair kindly asked if I had any questions. I said no, and I shouldn't have said no. I guess I'm going to back up. So thank you, Mr. Dis, for bringing that up. And I'm fairly new to the board, so I'm going for full transparency. Didn't disclose this, what everyone saw. But bringing this to light, I'm just wondering if we back up just for a moment. The whole reason this board was created was the passage of WC1, not the one that was on, but the previous one. My point is that has a framework of direction and compliance that must be followed by this board. And I'm just wondering if this is why policy sometimes is policy, so that you're following a process, there's consistency, and there isn't any veering or inadvertent veering, not anything intentional. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to, I don't know, and maybe everyone knows, I mean, is there actually a policy in terms of what this board is responsible? Obviously, I think everyone agrees for the fiscal oversight of the money that is coming in specifically for capital improvements, building of new schools. So I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. But I wonder if there's clarity that can be given. Was there language that actually had a process? And if there's not, should that be something that should be looked at?
So a couple points I'd like to make. I mean, first of all, there is absolutely a policy of the Board of Trustees that clearly outlines the duties and responsibilities and even membership of this committee. So it'd do us all some good, put that on the next agenda and just quickly run through it and make sure that's a prominent part of the public record. Again, acknowledging that we did not take the study to the committee first, and that is heard and understood, and never want to make even an impression that order of operations is being disrespected. But also I am finding more and more frequently amongst our board, amongst community members, even amongst ourselves, as we begin executing the complexities of this facility modernization plan, that people are getting confused, and it's complex, and it's somewhat custom. What is a modernization project? So I think just hearing this conversation, we're going to do more each and every time to help connect that dot, because I know that we are being consistent with the program of projects that were recommended in that FMP, that were then programmed in our 5-year CIP, that we are now beginning to execute one of them, each of them at a time. And if you go back to your cadence, item 2, you'll see projects like Palmer and Maxwell and Loader, North Valleys that are on there. Oh my gosh, why are we jumping around the map like that? It all traces back very accurately to the FMP, but just hearing this conversation, it's in all of our best interest to make sure that that consistency and connection is crystal clear so that you guys can affirm it. Just like the WC1 ballot initiative that said new elementary school in the South Meadows area, new elementary school in the Spanish Springs area, new middle school in the Sun Valley area. We tie our program back into that to our benefit, right? This is what we said we were going to do. This is what we're doing. And it's a plan, right? It changes along the way, things like that, but we do that transparently. So, thank you.
Mr. Cobb? Oh, I'm sorry. Before we
Sorry,
go over
just-
to you, we'll.
Sorry, just for clarification. So, well, number one, thank you, because I think actually reviewing the policy, sometimes, you know, everyone came on at different times, and I think it's really good, even having that done on an annual basis or whatever the board collectively feels is appropriate. I think it reminds me of kind of like an employee handbook. You know, everyone looks at it for the benefits, and then, with all due respect, well, maybe not everyone, but the point is that you really only pull out your employee handbook usually when there might be some clarification needed, in surely a positive way. And so I think always looking at policy and having that built in terms of review, number one, it calibrates everyone to what our mission is, if you will. It grounds everyone in that. But more importantly, to your point, as you move forward with maybe how it originally was, and then moving where it's at now with the modernization plan, you know, is there something that maybe is more applicable now as you're building forward with not necessarily all the new schools that started and now moving into this modernization plan? So I really want to thank you for, and the chair, if you so desire to include that policy for review. Obviously, we're not making the policy, but it's good for us to know. So thank you.
All right, we'll move on to
right.
Member Cobb.
Thank you. I was kind of like some of the other members here struggling, and then really appreciate Member Ivory. At times I struggle sitting here going, okay, but I'm wearing the fiscal hat. I can't wear the policy hat that's making the educational decisions. So it's sometimes I'm trying to simplify that and going, okay, the board made this decision based on educational specs and how they are looking for the learning environment of children. We're here as a fiscal agent approving, and are you doing the process, and what are you doing? So I do kind of like the idea, is there in these situations, as we move forward with the FMP, and we're staying on track, like Member Ivory said, and if there's going to be a veer, it's coming back here, hey, we're going to have to go to the board with this policy that's going to probably change the educational spec that ultimately is going to come to you as a fiscal. You might want to listen, or is it a joint meeting, or does it come to us as informational, as you said beforehand? I think it's going to be different every time, just as you've said. As members are struggling, I think as we go through this FMP, it's going to be different as we tackle each school. Because it may require, like you're saying here, rezoning. Those are all policy decisions they have to make that ultimately are going to hit us on the fiscal side in some way, shape, or form. You're going to ask this body to prove money. So I think we're going to maybe trip a little here, and I don't think this was huge by any means, but yeah, I think one, reviewing the policy, and then, oh, hey, this is going to the board, we're doing a joint, or no, we want to do an informational, or come listen, because it may impact what we bring to you next. So more of just kind of a statement. And
Okay. If no more questions, actually, I kind of want to just make a comment. So yes, I appreciate the fact that we've already discussed this, we've already approved it back in the FMP, but I've got a feeling for most of us, we probably didn't understand the complexity with something like this, and completely understanding that. How difficult would it be, as far as the procedure, that something like this actually comes before this committee before it goes to the trustees?
That's not a inconvenience.
Because in my opinion, if nothing else, there's a perception of the community that, wait a minute, these guys really aren't doing anything. They're just rubber stamping whatever the trustees have said or whatever has been wanted by the district. So that, I think if nothing else, that's the one thing that would be important, that yes, we approve the FMP, we've reviewed it multiple times, but especially on something like this where it starts getting more complex, that maybe it comes to us first. I think that would be an idea that would be good. I don't know about the necessarily joint meetings or something, maybe if it's super complex, but I think if nothing else procedurally, like I said, if nothing else, the appearance that we're not rubber stamping everything that the trustees want to happen. And then secondly, I think it would be a great idea, and we really don't have an item on here that I could see as far as the process of an agenda item, but yeah, let's talk about that, roles and responsibilities, just to make sure that especially our new members are clear, and a refresher for those of us that have been here for a while.
You will have to take a test.
Yes. All right. I think with that, we're good to go ahead and close this item. And we will move on to 2.06, presentation, discussion, possible action to approve $99,500,000 for the 2024-2025 D Major Projects Program for projects throughout the district, as seen on Attachment A, and to forward the recommendations to future meeting of the Board of Trustees for approval. Please go ahead.
Thank you again. For the record, Dawit Hadgu. I'm the Deputy Chief for the Facility Management Department. Not that Teresa and Adam did the hardest part of the job, maybe mine probably seems very simple this time. Thank you. At this time, we're asking for the 87 million and the Pine Middle. I don't want to call it Pine School anymore. For the Pine campus, another $12 million for the design, a total of $99 million. The one thing I want to mention, we changed the format just a little bit to make it a little bit better than what it was before. At least on the second page, you will see all these substantially completed projects. Used to be in the front with a green tick mark where those things, now we just put them on the back so that you see how many of them has been completed or close to completion. And we've been tracking these numbers since the passing of WC1, so all the information is there. You can see the one on the first page with the red tick arrows are projects fully funded, and the other ones are potential for future. But at this time, we're asking for the $99.5 million for the two projects.
And do we have any questions for this action item? If we have no questions, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Andriola, second by Cobb. All those in favor signify yes by saying a. Yeah. Oh, Lord.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
You're looking for that word.
Thank you. Aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. Motion passes. And we have a point of order, so we don't have legal counsel here. It's a procedural question, and I think probably since we don't have legal counsel, one of our members wants to bring up a potential agenda item. I think what we'll do is we'll have the conversation, and I'll present that to staff. But just as a point of order, I'm not sure where or how we put these in, so, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I know it's not an agenda item, but I do think that when you have the conversation, it may be wonderful. We all serve on different boards, and we all have seen many agendas. It's very common to have an item for possible future agenda items. And, you know, based on your conversation, I realize it's not agendized, but that may be an opportunity so we don't run into this again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to.
Mr. Chair, real quick, to add to Member Andriola's, really at the end, I think a lot of us do have a final agenda item that is announcements from board members or the chair or legal, and open-ended for future agenda items. So that might, and I don't think we've ever had that on this. Have we ever
Yeah,
had
so
this, Adam?
Maybe like member or staff comment type.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
updates or.
Well, we can talk it through and make sure that we're going right. I just don't want it to sound like we're deliberating on something that's not on the agenda.
If you need a sample, I only serve on 11 boards. You're welcome to contact
Take
me.
one. All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to move to item 3.01, public comment. Do we have any closing public comment?
Yes, from Pablo Nava Duran.
Thank you.
Hi guys, hello. I want to say thank you for approving those two school, Weed High School Foundation and Pine. I'm not gonna say Pine Elementary School, but the new elementary school on the Pine campus. So I would like to create a naming community. Make sure that each community listen, and they wanna, name change to Oscar Delgado Elementary School, we could do that. That's my projection, like for example, so it's up to the community, new elementary school, new culture, new missions, vision statement, and new principal and new staff. So thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Any other comments?
No.
All right, with that, then we'll move on to 3.02, announcement of the next meeting, which is April 3rd, 2025. And then our favorite part, 3.03, meeting adjournment.
How are you?
You know what I want?
What do you want?
So I'm dropping my kid off at school a couple days ago, and Jessica, and I'm pulling out, and there's this car. It's right alongside Plum Lane. Plum is a long, straight road. Nobody drives the 15. Nobody drives the 15.
So I just
There's
found
this
out
woman
your
in the
son was
crosswalk.
coaching my
She
son for a
has
while. So I'm like,
Oh, I'm 13, my brother.